One day, this woman sits down in a coffee shop with her friends, and she takes a sip of coffee, and she dies almost instantly. How? So the woman's name is Myrna, and 2 years before that, she's in Sydney, Australia, eating at a restaurant with her best friend from college, this woman, Jessica. And Jessica, she's there complaining about her boyfriend, and Myrna decides to give her a little advice. Myrna basically says, your boyfriend's trash, you need to break up with him. And Jessica gets pissed, because Myrna just called out her relationship. So she stands up and immediately just storms out of the restaurant. Now, this little moment is important because allegedly it creates sort of a rift between the two of them. And from there, their lives go in two completely different directions. Jessica, her relationship falls apart, she gets depressed, she gets fired from her graphic design job, she's drinking a lot. At one point, she gets so drunk she crashes her car into a retirement home. She's in and out of the hospital because she keeps trying to unalive herself. I mean, all kinds of stuff. While Myrna, her life's going great. Her career's looking good, she gets married to her longtime boyfriend, they have a wedding in Bali, which, by the way, she doesn't invite her old friend Jessica to the wedding because fuck her. But at some point, Jessica just can't take it anymore. Myrna has the perfect life. She never has to struggle. And Jessica feels like Myrna doesn't deserve it. And that is when she allegedly decides she's gonna unalive Myrna. Now, a few years after the restaurant incident in Sydney, both Jessica and Myrna end up living in Jakarta, Indonesia at the same time because they're both originally from there. And this is perfect for Jessica's plan. So she reaches out to Myrna. Hey, want to catch up? Want to meet up for coffee? And Myrna isn't really sure. She doesn't really trust Jessica anymore. So she agrees, but she brings a mutual friend along who we'll just call Friend. And fast forward to hours before the coffee shop meetup. Jessica texts Myrna and Friend wanting to know their drink orders because she plans on buying coffee for the whole group when they meet. Then, about an hour and a half before the meetup, Jessica goes to the coffee shop early, and she scopes the place out, mentally noting where all the CCTV cameras are. Then she leaves, and she goes and gets some shopping bags from another store. And she comes back to the coffee shop, and she orders drinks for the whole group. Then she sits down at a table and uses the shopping bags as like a little wall to sort of block off the drinks, so no one can see what she's about to do. She then puts 300 milligrams of cyanide in Myrna's coffee, twice the amount needed to unalive someone. Then almost an hour later, Myrna and Friend arrive. And they exchange hellos, and then they sit down, and then Myrna takes a sip of that poisoned iced coffee. And immediately she's like, this tastes weird. And then within just a single minute, her head falls back limp. And right there in the coffee shop, she starts having convulsions. And both staff and customers, they all panic, and everyone rushes to Myrna's aid. Everyone except for Jessica, who's just sitting there, showing no emotion. But then, during all this commotion, I guess Jessica suddenly feels like she needs to point fingers at someone, and she decides to accuse the coffee shop of putting something in Myrna's drink. She's like, what did you put in her coffee? And that is where Jessica screws up. Because she accused the coffee shop manager is like, well, now I need to prove we didn't put anything in there. So instead of throwing it away, coffee shop manager takes Myrna's iced coffee and she saves it. Meanwhile, they rush Myrna to the hospital. But, unfortunately, it's too late. She doesn't make it. And they investigate, and they ultimately conclude that she did indeed die of cyanide poisoning. Then about 3 days after Myrna's death, police get the iced coffee that the manager had saved, and they get it tested. And sure enough, they find it contains about 300 milligrams of cyanide. So they arrest Jessica. I couldn't find any mugshots of her. I don't know if they actually do mugshots in Indonesia. But here's what she looks like in real life. So she goes to trial. The trial goes on for 5 months, and it becomes the biggest national spectacle in Indonesia, dominating every headline, watched by millions of Indonesians, with a lot of people debating whether or not she's actually guilty. But unfortunately for her, Jessica ultimately is found guilty and she's sentenced to 20 years in prison. So, shout out to Jakarta.